Here's the challenge. Deciding what is a want and what is a need is challenging. I'll give you an example of something where it's hard to decide on something being a want or a need. A smartphone. When I teach teenagers about personal finance, I say, is a smartphone a want or a need? There's a lot of productivity that you can get done on a smartphone. It's true. But there's also a lot of distractions that live on that smartphone, a lot of games, a lot of fun. There's a little bit of social clout in carrying the biggest, shiniest, newest smartphone from Apple or Android or Google or whoever. But is it a real need? If the real need for a phone is going to be texting or phone calls, well, that can be done with a flip phone. That can be done with something that costs you $25 to $30. And any more these days. This might be a hot take, but cell phone technology, even with the smartphone stuff, has advanced so far beyond what's necessary to keep in our pockets. You can get a phone that's like 5 years old now, new in the box, just never sold, and you can get it for, $100 or less. An old phone, brand new, it works just fine, and it will serve almost every and anything you need a smartphone to do. You might not have the highest quality camera. I don't record this podcast with the world's highest quality camera. The camera I'm looking at right now is at least 6 years old. And the camera I'm looking at over here is also around 6 years old. So where do you put the expense of a cell phone? Is it going to be a need or a want? How do you split it up between those? Do you really need to make a difference between a flip phone or a Nokia and a smartphone? I'll give you another example. That's going to be cable and streaming services. Do you really need $100, $200, or even $300 in subscriptions, cable bills, TV stuff, all going out when you're busy, you're working, and you don't even use the TV that often, and you don't come close to using all of those streaming services on the regular? Almost no matter how you shake it, entertainment is going to fall under want and not a need. Even though we may feel like we need to keep up with the latest shows in order to maintain small talk at the water cooler. I could go on and on about things where you look at it and you go, oh, I really need this in my life. But that thing you need is actually a want. And it's difficult unless we sit down and very clearly define the difference between wants and needs. To budget properly, to budget in a way that's going to healthily promote frugality. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention two more beyond what they have in this article. One of them would be called the traditional budget. The traditional budget is where you, just like the zero-based budget, you write down your expenses and you list them all out. But instead of listing all of them out, you kind of list what you think you're obligated to pay on the ones that are predictable. And the ones that aren't predictable, you put down what you'd like to spend or save. And you go down everything that you have and you take your income, subtract all those expenses, and it may not be zero. What you're basically doing is saying, I need to do these things. And then you have the slush amount at the end. That slushy amount, the amount that doesn't get assigned a mission, then becomes discretionary or fun money. You can have discretionary or fun money categories in your zero-based budget, and you can intentionally align them out from your income that you have. But there's a problem with that slushy amount, that unplanned volume of money that you have coming in. What do you do with it when it comes in? Well, if you end up having that, first off, that's a blessing. You're meeting all of your goals and needs. That's great. But as you go through the month, you're not going to know where that money's going. And it might not be used in a frugal or efficient way, and it may not embody the opportunity cost that reflects your values, virtues, and goals. In marriage, if you don't budget every dollar in your budget and you leave something that's just completely miscellaneous and unplanned between the two of you, well, you could both end up going into it and spending the money that was allocated to being nothing, or unallocated, if you will, and end up spending into the planned categories. Or you might have one spouse that ends up spending more of the slushy money than the other. And there might be this feeling of, well, why do you always get to spend that? Or why are you in charge of this money? And why don't I get any say in it? Well, or I'm going to go spend this. It leaves room for miscommunication. It leaves room for judgment. It leaves room for problems that will show up in trying to figure out what to do with that money down the road. By planning it on paper on purpose, every dollar that you expect to be getting in that month, what you're doing is you're removing any vagueness, any question in the plan moving through the road. You remove the need to take time to make an informed decision using the shortcuts that your brain are going to apply to spending or savings or giving on a whim. and you're going to start making yourself subject to what I would consider less intentional decision making. It also increases my level of stress if I have to be making those decisions that could be otherwise pretty heavy if I don't understand the opportunity cost throughout the month, as opposed to doing it in advance, doing it on purpose. If I'm doing it all up front, I'm ultimately going to spend less time and stress planning with my money than I would if I had to do it all throughout the month or in part throughout the month. So I'm going to say that the traditional budgeting method, while it can work, does leave room for some things that we need to think about. The other budgeting method that I want to bring up is kind of specific. It's a variation of zero-based budgeting. I'd be remiss for not mentioning it because it has such a different mentality behind it. It's a paid program or business. I'm not sponsored by them. I've had clients, though, who've used them, and that's YNAB. YNAB stands for You Need a Budget, and this is their website. So again, I'm not sponsoring YNAB, but what they do at YNAB is they say instead of budgeting the money that you expect to have coming in that month, you budget the money that lives in your checking account, and you budget every dollar in your possession either to go to savings, giving, or spending. And they follow rules on giving every dollar a job, but unlike the zero-based budget where you are giving dollars missions based on what you expect to be coming in, you're only giving dollars missions if you have that dollar in your possession now. And as you get a paycheck, you sit down every time you get a paycheck and you assign those dollars missions. You don't do it in budget chunk or monthly chunks. You do your budgeting in paycheck chunks. Their second rule that they have on their website is to embrace your true expenses. Well, that's going to basically be their way of thinking about those unplanned expenses that pop up and preparing for them using sinking funds or some alternative verbiage that they use. Rule 3 is roll with the punches and be okay to make changes. YNAB has this great YouTube channel where they have little promotional videos for their product. It is a paid product. YNAB is a paid thing. It's a subscription. You subscribe to use their budgeting tool. But the promo video I'm thinking about was pretty interesting. They talked about how if you write a traditional zero-based budget, you go through, you get to the end of the month and you actually outspent the budget and you look at it and it's like running an autopsy. Okay, why did the patient die? And you have to go back and look at the tracked expenses and say, okay, where did we go wrong and why did we go wrong and what behavior led to this and what do we do about it now? And it's stressful. That's their point. The method that they have, because you have to make changes every time you're going to outspend what you had allocated on the plan. It prompts you with the app, oh, you outspent this particular item because it's like linked to your card. As you spend with your card, it updates and you have to assign the categories or it automatically allocates to the categories. I've never fully used it, but the app actively promotes you to re-budget whenever you outspend a category. And that's their rule 3, roll with the punches. Number 4 here is age your money. And that's the fourth and last rule that YNAB has for their system. In aging money, what they do for you to break the paycheck to paycheck cycle, because that's really one of the biggest goals here, is they just simply rephrase various facets of frugal budgeting in a way that changes the way that you think about it. And I do like their approach in that regard. But aging your money is one of the ways that they get you to break the paycheck to paycheck cycle. They're basically saying, get a month ahead. When I talk about the zero-based budget and I'm talking about the buffer you have in your checking account, if it's equal to what you expect to earn that month, well, your zero-based budget is following their rule 1, giving every dollar a mission and only doing it when you have the money in your possession. If you're aging your money, they're saying you're getting a month ahead, but they encourage you to continue aging your money more and more and more. How far out in advance are you budgeting? Instead of budgeting for the month now, if you are acquiring extra money down the road, you could be running 3 or 4 months down the road a budget, and every dollar you have in your possession is already allocated to expenses over the next 3 months if you're doing the 4th month's budget now. So you could end up getting a bigger and bigger and bigger pool sitting in your checking account. And you have a plan for all that money that you've acquired, and it's mapped out for a while. And it almost replaces the idea of an emergency fund. If you were to say, let's get 3 to 6 months of aging your money up, then you're saying, I want to have all that time planned out, and I'm going to have that much of my expenses sitting there. And past 6 months, instead of aging my money anymore, I'm going to start putting stuff into savings and making sure that I have those sinking funds. YNAB is a very active method of budgeting. It involves a lot of touches throughout every day, every week, but it does it in a way that makes those touches, that involvement, that activity attractive. Instead of being reactive, if you're not someone who updates your budget regularly and you're using a more traditional or the zero-based budget method, this one here is going to grab you by the ears and go, pay attention. This is what we're doing, and this is real, and you need to focus on it. So I'm just going to show, if you're on YouTube, you can see that I'm on the YNAB website. They have a video here, how it works, and this lady, I forget her name, but she's rather entertaining. She goes through the 4 rules that I listed. They talk about why it works. They talk about what life is with or without their rules. And by and large, I agree with their approaches. The problem I have is the mentality shifts so far to using their tool that you become beholden to using the YNAB method, the YNAB subscription, in order to manage your money. It really does embed you and integrate you into that recurring expense, when if another budgeting method works just as well for you, you could avoid that paid for subscription expense. I don't think budgeting should have to cost you money every month. I think it should just cost your discipline, your intentionality, and a little bit of time. The other thing, in my opinion and experience, that YNAB doesn't do very well is enable you to project your future out. If you have your aged up money and you have your sinking funds and you have money coming in and you just keep assigning it to your expenses way down the road as opposed to now, it does become a little bit more abstract, trying to figure out, okay, each month, how much am I saving toward retirement or toward my particular sinking fund goals? If you want to make a 5 or a 10-year plan, how do you know you're on track for it if you've already made so many decisions? And if you go back and you change the decisions in order to try to switch it up for your goals, well, it might cascade into needing to change your decisions all the way down the road in a way that could cost you a lot of time. It's like almost over planning if you age your money up a lot, and that's your focus with YNAB. The thing I like about a zero-based budget that works on a monthly basis is a month is a wonderful increment of time that you can use to project out. It's a nice way that you can frame, okay, if I do this every month, I'm going to make my goals on time. It just becomes so abstract when you're using YNAB, because it takes so much of the thinking out of it in order to help you develop your relationship with money. And it does a good job for what it does, but everything has a pro and a con. Every budgeting method has a pro and a con. Every budgeting method we talked about today may be a full solution or a solution in part that needs to be combined with another. And the way you combine your budget methods, the way that you think about it, needs to be specific to you and how you function. But there are things that I believe also have a universal truth to them. Part of the universal truth I understand about budgeting is if you're not planning with everything and you're leaving something on the table, it leaves a space for a gray area. It leaves a space that's lacking clarity. It leaves a space that's lacking intentionality and thus frugality. And I want you to remember that as you continue to budget bravely and enjoy your hope-filled financial future.